start looking at the hip, we really need to understand a little bit about the mechanics and why it just doesn't make sense to add more resistance to your hip flexors if you want to flex the hip, because that sounds like a good idea. But there's a really interesting setup in the spine and its relationship to the pelvis that literally took me about 10 to 15 years to work out in relation to dancers getting their legs higher in Développé Devant and à la Seconde. And so I wanted to go through that with you so that you get this backgrounding before you start working with your extensions. Now, the biggest complaint that most people have is that they feel jammy up in the top of the hip or gripping in the thigh. And a lot of dancers say, my teacher tells me to not use my thigh, but I don't know how to use anything else. Once you understand the relationship of your low back to all this, it becomes a whole lot easier. So if we look at the spine, you have some tiny, deep little stabilizing muscles in here. Your multifidus, your rotatories, your intertransversarii, all the baby back muscles. Then you have these big strappy back muscles, which are more designed for movement. Now, in normal people, your psoas major, which attaches to the front of your spine, it's one of your hip flexors. Part of its role is to stabilize the spine. It then comes forward to the front of the hip, attaches to the thigh bone through here, and acts as a hip flexor. Now, normal people, they can use that psoas to help stabilize their spine, but normal people don't ask their leg to be above their head for most of the day. So if we're wanting to use it much more as a hip flexor, we can't rely on it as a spinal stabilizer. So what we need to do is get the deep little back muscles stabilizing the spine. This allows the psoas to let go of its spinal stabilizing role a little to be able to work as a hip flexor. If it is working as a hip flexor, along with its friend iliacus, which sticks to the inside here and directly connects in, this really helps the centralization of the hip. This means that the flexion of the hip is coming from much deeper and the load doesn't get transferred to your more superficial hip flexors, which are your TFL and rectus femoris. So if somebody is complaining that they're getting gripping through the side or through the front of their quads, the first thing I do is actually look at the stability of the back. Ways that you can know that your back is not very stable is if you tend to sit with a little bit flexed, if you tend to get a sore back when you're sitting or standing for long periods of time, if you feel a little bit blocked into extension, or you just feel like you need a massage there all the time. Those are signs that you're using your big back muscles a little bit too much, and we may need to look at stabilizing the deeper layers. We're going to put a lot of focus on this in this program because the more stable you are through the lower back, the lighter your extensions will become.